Happy Christmas to you all. I'm Duggan and Shane Hannon with me here. This is a special Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk for your Christmas day. I always say at the top of each show, I hope you're doing all right, and I always mean it. And on this day of days, we really hope you're having a nice time at home, or if you're out and about, whatever you're doing, spending time with loved ones, exchanging presents, already tucking into the turkey and ham, phoning a friend, or even listening to the radio, listening to ourselves this afternoon. So Shane and myself are with you through to 5 o'clock. We're going to look back between now and 4 on the sporting highlights of 2021. And then from 4 until 5, we're going to play out highlights of one of the more memorable Saturday panels we had this year, back in May, with Sonia O'Sullivan, John Tracy and Lizzie Lee. So Shane, have you been enjoying your Christmas?
I've been loving Christmas, John, although, it's a different Christmas, quite like last Christmas, but you kind of make the most of the little moments, the couple of quiet cans, the meeting up with a couple of friends, watching Home Alone, the traditional stuff. So it's been a grand old Christmas.
Yeah, as long as we have our health, I think is the main thing, Shane. What we're going to do is we're going to pick 5 sports and memorable moments from the year and have a chat about them and look forward to reminiscing a bit. I'm going to start off. So I'm going to do the odd numbers, you do the even numbers, Shane, out of the 10. So I'm going to start off with, I think the biggest story for me of the year was Rachel Blackmore winning the Grand National and winning the leading jockey prize at Cheltenham. So this would be a no-brainer generally for Kelly Harrington or Fintan McCarthy or Paula Donovan, Olympic gold medal winners, because we don't have any of them in our history in the country. But Rachel Blackmore, what I think she did, Shane, was off the scale. 32 years of age, turned pro in 2015, took her 6 months to ride a winner. And then in 2021, a few years later, she has ridden more winners at the Cheltenham Festival, 6, than the entire UK trained horses. And then goes on to the Grand National. And there was a movie in the 40s for Hollywood done called National Velvet with Elizabeth Taylor in it, about this young girl who trains and rides a horse in the Grand National and wins. And then there's controversy about it. But there was no controversy about Rachel Blackmore winning on Minetta Times. Her elation when she crossed the winning post. I know, Shane, we were there on the day on Off the Ball when it broke, the story. And this story is just fantastic because in 1839, Lottery won the first Grand National. We're talking 170 years of this, 180 years of this great race. And this is global news. And for somebody who was late to the game and worked so hard and got support of the likes of Henry de Bromhead and Eddie O'Leary, giving her the chance, and she's taken the chance. And I really think, for me, it's one of the greatest achievements in Irish sporting history. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
100%. And like, I remember that day in studio, John, in the Off the Ball studios, as we, I think it was during an ad break when the race actually came to a close, and we were kind of watching the final moments. And we kind of mentioned it earlier that day in the news round. I think we said, look, Minetta Times has a chance, and any horse with Rachel Blackmore aboard certainly has a chance. But we, just because of history, because of the fact that no woman had ever won it, you almost think, oh, is it ever going to happen? How long is this going to take? But hairs are standing on the back of my neck when she crossed the line. And the great thing about it was that it surprised nobody. The fact that Rachel Blackmore went and shattered this glass ceiling of horse racing. And I mean, it was just one of those moments. And the thing about Rachel Blackmore, no airs or graces about her whatsoever. There's so much modesty, and you kind of sense that from her interviews after the fact, even after her incredible Cheltenham Festival as well, as you mentioned. And she's just someone who, like, we talk about the fact that, you know, female athletes can inspire other young girls. She's inspiring young girls and young boys across Ireland to get into horse racing. Not all of them will see it through, but some of them will. And that's a testament. That's her legacy. And she's just someone who you can't help but admire for everything she's achieved, for the way in which she conducts herself, the way she goes about it. And to see what she did this year in the Inter Grand National, and to see her make history was a pleasure to watch it and to see it, not in person but on the television, and to kind of for anyone in entry, I can only imagine what it was like for the Irish over in entry to experience that particular moment. But the great thing about it is, I think Malachy Clerkin wrote a great piece in the Irish Times towards the latter part of this year about the female athletes and what they've achieved in Irish sport in 2021. And she's right at the top of that list, as you mentioned. She's one of these people who has just done extraordinary things, and by the way, will continue to do extraordinary things. So well deserved, John, I think, to have Rachel Blackmore in there as one of your first picks.
Yeah, and we had all the gold generation of jockeys, Shane, Barry Geraghty, Ruby Walsh, Paul Carberry, AP McCoy, not only stylish in the saddle, but also a lot of them great communicators. And we needed new stars. And racing has not had the best of years, public relations wise, not had the best of years. And still, even in December, there's still issues going on in racing. But I think this is the beacon. This is a global story for Rachel Blackmore to be becoming the first woman to win the Grand National. And it's only significant, I think, because Katie Walsh and Nina Carberry have won Irish Grand Nationals before, but there's very, very few sports where the men and the women compete alongside each other. So for her to break that ceiling, it's not that it was about gender really or anything. It was about the fact that she's the best. And when she was riding some of those races at Cheltenham, she rode a race on a horse called Sir Gerhard in the bumper, and she clearly stole the race. And because she was riding with such confidence, she was disappointed when she didn't win the Gold Cup behind Manila Indo, a horse she could have ridden. So this is a person at the top of their game. Doesn't matter what the gender is, but the fact that she did break the ceiling is significant. And that's why, for me, she's my number one pick this year. Shane, what is your number one pick?
Yeah, let's go with another female athlete. No surprise, given that the year that Irish athletes and female athletes in particular have had. But Kelly Harrington, and really, look, I'll focus on the Olympics in general and the Irish achievements at Tokyo. Of course, delayed by a year because of the coronavirus pandemic, but we got there in the end. And I mean, Kelly Harrington, I remember the scenes in Dublin Airport when she came home, and the great quote from her was she was looking forward to a cup of tea, a few biscuits, and maybe some donuts. That was all that was on her mind after sheer domination over in Japan. And Portland Row had other plans. Portland Row was a scene of pandemonium in the latter stages of Kelly's tournament, and especially for that final. I know we had our own Aisling O'Reilly out at Portland Row the morning of the fight. I think it was very, very early hours. It was probably 5 or 6 in the morning Irish time when she finally took to the ring in that gold medal bout. And what a fight as well. I mean, she's 31 years of age, and to beat Beatriz Ferreira, the Brazilian, in the manner in which she did, I think even boxing purists would appreciate what she did in that fight. So that was the women's 60 kg lightweight final in Tokyo. Ireland's 11th ever Olympic gold medal. Their second in the 2021 Olympics is, of course, after the rowers. And just what Portland Row that week with the Irish flags, the tricolours, the open top bus for Kelly as she came back home. I remember Kelly's father, Christy, speaking on saying it's like Christmas Eve. They're all waiting for Santa Claus. They're actually tracking in the airplane, like people on the flight radar apps, watching where Kelly Harrington was in the skies over Ireland or when she was going to land. Unanimous points decision in the fight itself. Only the second Irish female boxer, of course, to win an Olympic medal. We had Katie Taylor's gold, of course, back in London in 2012. She came strong in the second couple of rounds. And let's not forget the Brazilian fighter was the reigning world champion. The third time Ireland had won Olympic boxing gold, we remember Michael Carruth in Barcelona at 92, which by chance was 29 years to the day when Kelly Harrington won her own gold medal, an 18th boxing Olympic medal in total for Ireland. That's more than half of the 34 medals we've won in total. So clearly our domination in boxing showing no signs of stopping whatsoever. And I remember even that the bronze medal bout, that the semi-final, if you like to call it, against Sirapon Susondi as well, that the Thai boxer, 3-2 split decision. That was a tight one as well, and someone she had bouts with in the past as well. And she'd been behind on 3 of the 5 judges' scorecards after the first round against the Thai boxer. So you're thinking at that point, what does Kelly have left in the locker here? But as Kelly Harrington often does, she pulls it out of the locker, grew in confidence. And then it was the classic final, the 2018 world champion against the 2019 world champion. And the Brazilian had only ever lost 6 fights heading into that bursting into the international stage in 2017. But Kelly proving herself, best lightweight in the world. I think it can't be denied at this stage. So Kelly Harrington, certainly worth a mention. I should mention the rowers as well. First time since 1932.
Yeah, like almost overshadowed in a way. Normally we'd be just jumping through hoops about Paul O'Donovan and Vince McCarthy. Completely.
And given the characters that the O'Donovan boys are, and to see Paul, I mean, Paul's at the top of his game, and he showed that in Rio. First time since 1932, Ireland has won gold medals in 2 different sports at the same Olympics. So if we have nothing to celebrate after that, I don't know when you'll celebrate, but Paul O'Donovan and Fitton McCarthy, of course, crowned champions. That was the lightweight sculls. George Hamilton as well, commentating on his first ever gold medal, having covered Olympics for such a long time for Ireland. So it really historic moment. I should mention the other medalists as well for Ireland, because anytime we get a medal for a country of our size, it's worth a mention. So Aidan Walsh, of course, in the boxing and the men's welterweight, picked up a bronze medal. And then the bronze medals for the rowing as well. The women's coxless 4 on July 28th, they picked up their bronze medals. Africa Keogh, Emer Lamb, Fiona Murtagh and Emily Hegarty. So a successful Olympics, I think you'd have to say, John, but Kelly Harrington, top of my pile.
Absolutely, Shane, you're absolutely right. It was hard to go to Tokyo with all these restrictions of COVID. Kelly Harrington, I've met her a couple of times, and I don't know the lady very well, but I think everybody will generally feel that when you see Kelly Harrington speaking, she's just sound. She's just sound. She's a regular person, and she's an amazing athlete. And to win that gold medal, as you say, and come from behind, it's not rare, not usual in an Olympic final to do that. And for so long, she's in the shadow of Katie Taylor. And Katie Taylor now is a pro doing so well, and Kelly Harrington is an Olympic champion. And you're going through all the names there: Bob Tisdall, Pat O'Callaghan, Ronnie Delaney, Michael Carruth, Katie Taylor. Very few gold medals out of this country since we became an independent state. So it's a fantastic story, and hopefully in Paris there'll be more to come. So couldn't agree with you more about our fantastic performance at the Olympics. I'm going to go for number 3 with hurling and Limerick's first ever 2 in a row. I was lucky enough to be there among the 40,000 souls in August. We were kind of half back at the time, and hopefully we will be back fully again next year. It was a strange day in a way because the match was over, Shane, at half time. Limerick scored 318 in the first half. This was hurling engineering. This was something I did not grow up watching. I grew up watching chaos when I watched hurling. I would watch a lot of physical play, the slitter going into the middle of the park, and the battle for the breaking ball, and the to and fro of the long puck outs and back again and to the half back line, and low enough scoring. Whereas what we saw, I think, from Limerick was something like that Pep Guardiola would have conjured if he was a hurling manager. I do have a bit mixed feelings about it, to be honest, because this has been alchemy generated in an academy for 10 years, that the perfection, they only 4 of their scores out of the 332 were not from play, which is incredible when you think about it. The lack of mistakes, the playing the ball out from the back, the precision, runners off the shoulder, the accuracy. And Limerick have become one of the very few counties to win now double digits. They've won 10 All-Irelands. But to think about it, Shane, like between 1940 and 2018, they won 1 All-Ireland, 1973. And now to win 3 out of 4 is pretty sensational under John Kiley, under that great coach Paul Connacht as well. Caroline Curd doing the sports psychology. Kieran Kerry, we had him on the show. His uncle is calling Keane Lynch the Messi of hurling. And some of the and you'd know he had a soccer background, some of the movement and the flicks off the stick and everything. And it was epitomized for me, Shane, in the fact that they won 12 All-Stars. Like 9 was the record. And for a defeated team in the first time in the 50-year history of the All-Stars, and an All-Ireland final, not to get even a look in. But who are you going to leave out? Who are you going to leave out of the Limerick team? And this is the thing, and this is how good they are. So 2022 is going to be really exciting. Henry Shefflin on the sideline for Galway. Brian Cody's still there. But it's going to take a lot to dismantle Limerick, because the only team I've seen comparable to this Limerick team are Kilkenny in the noughties, when they won 4 in a row, and they won all those titles under Brian Cody in other years as well. 2008, Kilkenny really demolished Waterford. And this was a similar thing between Limerick and Cork. So I don't think Limerick are over their peak yet. Sport is cyclical. It will not go on forever. We saw that with the Dublin footballers. But for Limerick, and my mother's in Limerick, and I grew up going to Limerick every single weekend, and it was misery. Now it is bounty when it comes to their hurlers. And I think they're great role models. They're a nice group of lads, and they're an honour to their, and the people of the city and the county should be really proud of the Limerick hurlers. They've achieved some greatness now at senior level.
100%. And like, I think the thing about it is there's been no arguments to the All-Stars discussion. Like, of course, some people throw up a fit when they see certain names left off an All-Stars team, but the fact that 12 Limerick hurlers could get picked on an All-Star team, as you mentioned, and there to be little to no pushback against that, it probably sums up the sheer domination. Like you mentioned, the 4 points, only 4 points from frees or from place balls of a 332 scoreline. That's terrifying. That's the only word for it. I mean, robotic almost in their domination. And like you mentioned, Paul Connacht, I'm sure he gets and deserves to get a lot of credit in what he does. I know a lot of the Limerick players will have singled him out in different interviews and stuff as well, rightly so. But like, they have a man at the helm in John Kiley who just lives and breathes hurling. Like, I remember being at the 2018 hurling semi-final, that great game against Cork, when Nicky Quaid made that great save. Shane Downey came on, I think, scored a goal as well. Like, just amazing scenes, one of the best atmospheres I've ever experienced in sport. But it was really interesting to hear an interview with John Kiley this year where he talked about, after that semi-final, having to take a break, whether it was anxiety or just getting so overwhelmed with the emotion of an occasion like that, had to take whatever it was, a few days or a week off training, let the backroom staff take training sessions. That's how much John Kiely puts his heart and soul into Limerick hurling. You mentioned that the drought that Limerick hurling fans have had to experience, and for that reason, you're so happy for them, because they've gone through the tough period of not winning All Irelands for whatever it is, 40 years and more. And now finally they have a team that is not just an All Ireland winning team, as we saw a number of years ago, but they are a dominant force. They're a Kilkenny of the noughties. Like they're going to dominate hurling for the next number of years. And granted, another team might sneak in a win here or there, but over the next 6 to 8 years, you'd be surprised if Limerick didn't pick up 4 or 5 All Irelands at least in that time period. Like even Sean Finn, like I was looking at a story with Sean Finn there recently. He played a football match for his local soccer team, a soccer match there the other weekend, or at some point earlier in December, and scored a hat-trick. Like these are the guys who are just uber talented. They could probably play volleyball or tiddlywinks or whatever it is and be kings at it. That's just what they're like. Like Sean Finn is 25 years of age. He's already got 4 All-Stars. That doesn't bear thinking about. That's scary stuff. Like you start to question yourself then and your own life choices when you see a 25-year-old with 4 All-Stars for his county. Quite incredible. And then you see someone like Cian Lynch, as you mentioned, Kieran Kerry describing him as the Messi of hurling. I think I'm right in saying he now joins only Henry Shefflin as the multiple All-Ireland or winners of the Hurler of the Year gong. But really, just a team with uber talented hurlers, and they play the game in a different way. Like the neutrals were disappointed with that hurling final, John, because of the sheer one-sided domination of it. But the hurling purists can really appreciate what this Limerick team are all about.
Yeah. I'm a little bit worried about the game. I do think the Sliotar travels too far. I think it's too easy at the moment to hit a ball from 100 yards out for it to go over. I think the art of hurling has to a degree diminished. Maybe the boss is too easy. Maybe though it's the fact that these guys are just so physically conditioned, so skillful now, that they've just moved it to another level, and you have to almost look at the positive side of that. But yeah, I completely agree with you that. Look, you don't know what's around the corner. It's an amateur sport. With all these things, I think the biggest challenge for Limerick will be hunger, and to keep the hunger. But they seem very grounded, as you correctly said. John Kiely is a great leader of that group, and has been around a long time, especially at underage levels. So yeah, look, it's going to be a great season, and I think the round robins being back next year in Munster and Leinster are going to make it a great few months up to July, that final. What is your second pick?
Well, John, I've mentioned, they're tough picks. Like there's probably going to be things we've left out in the year because we're only picking 10, but we had to make a call and go with our gut, and couldn't leave out the Paralympians and the Paralympics that the Irish athletes had. Quite extraordinary, and we'll mention a few of them. So again, like I mentioned, Malachy Clerkin's piece talking about the biggest stories of 2021 belonging to Irish sports women. Probably a similar theme in the Paralympics in Tokyo as well. So Katie George Dunleavy and Eve McChrystal, first of all, I mean, they started off with the silver medal in the B 3,000 meters pursuit. These cyclists, unbelievable speed, especially the qualifying round. They set a new world record and then narrowly missing out on a gold medal in the final. But let's be honest, they made up for it. They got their gold medal, obliterated the field in the women's B time trial with a time of 42:32:07. Extraordinary time and a really, really impressive gold medal, cycling their way into the history books, essentially retaining the title they won 5 years previous at the Rio Paralympics. So to see Katie George Dunleavy and Eve McChrystal do what they usually do and pick up a couple of medals at Paralympic Games was really, really lovely to see. We had other medals as well. The hand cyclist Gary O'Reilly took bronze. Very humid conditions in the men's H5 time trial. If you watch those races, the hand cyclists, what they do is beyond comprehension. And to see what they do in humid conditions like we saw in Tokyo this summer it just beggars belief, really. And to see an Irish person in Gary O'Reilly take home a medal in that event was just fantastic. And it wasn't the only other medal. We saw Jason Smith, of course, the fastest Paralympian on the planet, gold in the T13 100 meters, unsurprisingly, but very, very close. It was a nice tense one, edged a photo finish when he pipped an Algerian athlete by 100th of a second. So we didn't only get a gold medal, we got a bit of drama along with it, which was brilliant to see. That's his 6th Paralympic title, Jason Smith, and maintaining, of course, his unbeaten run in championship races. He is just something else, that man. Unexpected medals can be sometimes the best. So Jason Smith's is probably what you would call an expected medal. and he's got so good that you'd almost call it an expected gold medal. But the unexpected medals can often taste the sweetest, and we had one of those in the pool with the 19-year-old swimmer Nicole Turner from County Laois, silver in the women's 50 meters butterfly event. So even her interview afterwards with Nicole Turner was it was just lovely. She said, I aimed to get a medal, but to be honest, to reach the podium now, the competitiveness in there, it's not sunk in. And what she meant was the quality of the field in that 50 meters butterfly event in the Paralympics was unparalleled, and something we hadn't seen in previous tournaments, it has to be said. So for Nicole Turner to go from kind of, outwardly saying she wanted a podium, but inwardly perhaps thinking that it might be beyond her, to then getting the silver medal and standing on that podium was quite incredible. And I should mention as well, someone who has been an inspiration for Irish athletes, not just in the pool but beyond, is Ellen Keane, and what a summer she had as well. Like, one of the quotes from Katie George Dunleavy after her race was, just for kids or adults at home with a visual impairment, that our success today shows you can do anything you want to do. There is nothing you can't do. This might inspire them, and I know it gives pride to people at home. I mean, Ellen Keane is someone who is kind of along those lines as well. So in her Paralympic final, a personal best, by the way, in a Paralympic final to take home gold, that's the stuff of dreams. Clontarf woman, her fourth Paralympics, made her debut back in 2008 in Beijing at just 13 years of age in the Paralympics. And her medal in Tokyo this summer was, of course, our first of the summer. So the SBE at 100 meters breaststroke blazed through the heats, won her race in a personal best time, obliterated that mark in the final, went nearly 2 seconds quicker to take gold, which just shows how much she had left in the tank. Battling out with Sophie Pascoe from New Zealand, 26-year-old, and Keane then taking the lead with 25 meters left, never looked back, took the gold. And she had fogged goggles as well in the final. She spoke about that afterwards. She said she had very little awareness of the swimmers around her, but improved on her bronze medal from Rio, won her first ever gold medal. And I've mentioned the quotes that Katie George Dunleavy came out with after her medal, but Ellen Keane's quotes, she really spoke of the respect or lack of respect sometimes the Paralympic athletes have got in comparison to their Olympic counterparts. And she said, I've had difficulty getting access to the pool at times, whereas the Olympians have complete access whenever they need it. I kind of hope now with this gold medal, it gives me a bit more respect. There have been times when I go training, my lane has been given to lessons. It's just so frustrating. And thankfully, I don't have to deal with it too much because my coach fights in my corner a lot of the time. And my coach is fighting for all the other para athletes and para swimmers who have access to the pool. She says it shouldn't be a fight. It should be equal respect for us and the Olympians. So to see someone like Ellen Keane, stand up and say those things after winning a gold medal was deserved, and something I know she will change now in the waters, and in terms of respect for Paralympic athletes going forward because of her achievements and those of the other athletes in the Paralympics this summer.
You've encapsulated that brilliantly, Shane, about the Paralympic Games. I don't really have much to add, only to say I do think this was the year that the Paralympics pierced the consciousness of the nation. And the same with women's sport, in that it was the year of the woman, with all the achievements of the women in our sport. And the Paralympics pierced that consciousness. And there was, I remember we had John Fulham on a panel there with Fiona Foley and Orla Barry back in the summer and on the Saturday panel. And one thing that kind of I remembered was, Ellen Keane should be on an Olympics panel. Why not? If there's television, I'll say a Paris coverage of the Olympics or the Paralympics, and just that the separation of that needs to change, and just that they are Olympic champions at the Paralympics, and they should be given their voice and their expertise to all kinds of conversation going forward.
Absolutely, here.
I'm going to go with soccer next, and a few things. The Republic of Ireland men's and women's team, and Stephen Kenny and Vera Pauw, and Euro 2020. I think they're probably the three big things soccer-wise this year. So I really feel positive about the men's and women's teams going into 2022. At times you wouldn't feel as positive earlier in the year, but I think now we're into the zone where it's all about results. So I do think there's a disclaimer to that statement, and I think Stephen Kenny and Vera Pauw are now on the dock in terms of their analysis of their performances. We know how bad it was for Stephen Kenny in that Luxembourg game, that nadir back in March, of that 1-0 defeat and an empty Lansdowne Road, and it was a 10th game in charge and no victories, to the 50,000 people that were there for the Portugal game in November, part of a run of one defeat in 9. I think the public and the fans and the players are behind this for Stephen Kenny, this project, this thing he's trying to do, for us to play football effectively, not hoofball, not a style of play that is pragmatic and only just trying to get us to the next result and maybe next tournament. It's a mixture of the two. But I think if you're playing a certain way, and honourable mentions must go to Coach Anthony Barry and Gavin Bazunu, who really lit up smiles on people's faces, and Shane Duffy, their Renaissance man, and Callum Robinson, who's now been able to start scoring goals. There is something building here, and it's no longer based on the short term. And the raw materials are not good. We don't have many players playing in the Premier League. So Stephen Kenny is a man of integrity, and I think people have warmed to him. And I think people understand that he wants a bit of time and he wants to build this thing. And next year with the Nations League, hopefully we can do well against Scotland, Armenia and Ukraine and build towards the Euros. He should get the contract, in my view, and he should be given time to try and build something, because if we're going to get to World Cups again, we're going to have a thread of style of play from the senior team down to all the underage teams and all the academies, and try to build a football industry in the country, because we don't have one. And we need government actual support for that. We need government support just as much as they give support from the taxpayer to the greyhound and horse racing industries, and to also to GA stadiums. They need to give that now to the pathway for young players in Irish football. For the women, Denise O'Sullivan, Katie McCabe leading lights in the team. Obviously, the Finland result was fantastic, going there and winning, and it's all about consistency. Can we keep the consistency? We've got two really big games next year, Slovakia away and Finland at home. If we can beat them, if we can get to that playoff, we're not going to get past Sweden, but to imagine reaching the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, how amazing would that be for the Irish women's team? For the Euros, loved it. With all these things, we all get carried away. International tournaments, we almost creep up on us. We don't even think about them. And then they arrive, and then we're just completely immersed in them. And then they finish, and then we forget about them. So that was the way I kind of felt about Euro 2020. Look, it was great to see Christian Eriksen recover from that really worrying cardiac arrest. That was the first thing. It's probably the most important thing to say from the get-go. Italy, Roberto Mancini, for me, they were a breath of fresh air. They were fantastic in the group. Wobbled a little bit along the way to the semi-final. That semi-final against Spain was one of the best games of football I've seen in recent years. Just fantastic. Won that on penalties, and then won on penalties against England in the final at Wembley. Federico Chiesa, I love him. Love watching him play football. Donnarumma in goal, Chiellini, Bonucci. I want to see the cop show of them in 10 years' time on Italian TV, and we'll get it onto Netflix. But I think Italy played with a huge amount of passion. They didn't qualify for the last World Cup. They reached this Euros. They won the final. And they had the guts, I think, that England lacked. England lacked that will and that belief in themselves, because England have so many talented players. They're well set up by Southgate. They're obviously motivated. They didn't concede a goal until the semi-final. But in that final, when they took the lead, they didn't go for the jugular, and they paid for it. And I hope for their sake, when they get to Qatar, because England has so many talented footballers, that they do themselves justice, because they didn't. And obviously, some of their fans disgrace themselves at Wembley as well, which is another thing to add. But that was the Euros for me. Premier League wise, Man City won that. Chelsea won the Champions League. English football, the Premier League is the global league. It is dominating the world at the moment in terms of quality. Liverpool back in the mix again for 2022. So I thought it was a great Euros. I don't know what you thought, Shane, but the 24 teams didn't seem to bother me, and there was lots of colourful teams to watch. And yeah, I thought the right winner won in the end.
Yeah, you've summed all those up quite well. And a couple of things I would add, like the fact that I think we had Karen Duggan on one of the shows earlier in the year on a Football Saturday, and like we were talking about the Irish women's team, and she mentioned the fact that it's great now that we're actually allowed to criticize and talk about Vera Pauw. This is the level we've got now with equality in terms of the men's and women's team, and rightly so. We're allowed to criticize Vera Pauw if she's not doing a good job, and we shouldn't be afraid to do that. If any of the Irish women's players aren't playing well, we can say that. It should be treated in punditry the very same as the men's sport, and rightly so. Luckily enough, the Irish team have been playing well. There's been no reason to criticise them. Katie McCabe is tearing it up in the Women's Super League. They've got the result, as you mentioned, against Finland. So things really looking up. And also to get the crowds that they're getting in Tallaght Stadium, and recognisable faces now. Like if young girls see Louise Quinn or Katie McCabe or Denise O'Sullivan or Anya O'Gorman or any of these players walking in the shops in Dublin or wherever at any stage, they're going to be recognised now, and that's fantastic. And that's because they're on television. It's because they're in the Women's Super League. A lot of them are playing their football at the top tier, and it's because they're so giving of their time as well, and being covered properly and extensively in media. So that's a positive. The men's team as well. Yeah, you've covered it. You've covered it greatly. They're like the Portugal game. I was at it. The atmosphere was electric. Might have been the most exciting 0-0 I've ever been at, potentially, but It just goes to show that you need to stick with the manager. We were often criticized on Saturdays, John, you know yourself, when you come through the texts.
Kenny FM.
Stephen Kenny FM. And that was a common thread throughout 2021. But I mean, you got to be patient with managers. You cannot just keep sacking and sacking. Like we spoke about it before. Who was there to take the job? Do you put Sam Allardyce, Chris Hughton in the job? I don't think so. And I think Stephen Kenny has proved eventually that he deserves that new contract. Of course, it took a little bit of time for his style of play to bed in. It's going to take a little bit more time, but I'd like to see him, have a full qualification campaign and see where he goes with it. Euro 2020, yeah, high drama. You're probably someone like myself who we had the wall chart up on the wall at home here in Monaghan and crossing off the scores and keeping track of the teams as the tournament went on. Ordinarily after a tournament, I just throw those in the bin. But there was something special about Euro 2020 that just kind of stuck in my craw that I really, really loved. We kept the wall chart this year. Myself, my brother, and my dad. We said we were going to keep this wall chart.
Keep the remaining wall charts now for the rest of your life. And in 20 years' time, you'll have 5 or 6 tournaments and wall charts.
Exactly. Stick them on eBay or something. But no, it was one of those tournaments that just I'll remember forever. There was the high drama of the penalties in the final. You mentioned the ugly scenes in Wembley, of course, as the crowds surged in without tickets. You mentioned the Eriksson incident and Simon Kjær, the Danish captain, covering himself in glory and in showing the leadership a captain shows in kind of shielding his teammate and friend from the gawking eyes of the crowd and the media. June 28th was a day which will live in my mind for quite some time. That was the day of the 2 games when I think it was both the last 16 games. Switzerland beat France on penalties in Bucharest. Spain beat Croatia after extra time in Copenhagen, and it was 2 of the best games I've ever seen. You already mentioned the cracking semi-final between Spain and Italy, but those 2 games on the same day, something about it just really lives in my memory and will forever. Of course, the Italian flair and dominance as well was enough for me to go out and buy an Italy Euro 2020 jersey. That's how much I love them. And the only other thing I'd mention, and we probably shouldn't mention it, is the European Super League. Of course, 2021 will be the year that was brought up into our consciousness. And here's hoping we never hear from it again. And in 2022, it no longer exists in our consciousness.
Well, so much has happened that it's easy to forget that Man United fans stormed the stadium and the match was called off. It's going to be a great World Cup next year in Qatar. Brazil are really well managed. It's Messi's swan song. France and Spain, as you say, even at the Nations League game, were fantastic. England, Italy, I can't wait for that. About Ireland, I just want to say, why do we watch sport? It's to get off our seat and to have that childlike innocence. And the game, as Danny Blanchflower said, is about glory and it's about enjoying the spectacle. And that's why I think I'm positive about the Republic of Ireland. What is your next pick, Shane?
Next one, John, is the Formula One. So Hamilton
or Verstappen, which camp are you in?
This is the thing. Like, I even spoke before the final race in Abu Dhabi and said I'm in neither camp here. I just want a dramatic finish. And I probably cursed the whole thing. I shouldn't have said anything because I think we got more drama than we possibly could have hoped for.
How do you feel? How do you feel now about it? Do you feel good about it? You're the resident Formula One nut and off the ball. Are you have a good feeling after what you saw in Abu Dhabi? Because I thought it was the Netflix. I thought it was the Netflixization of sport. Yeah,
and that's a fair point. To sum up how I feel about it, probably like for these topics we're discussing today, we all kind of went off and did our little bits of research and took down our few notes. When it gets to Verstappen versus Hamilton here on my screen, John, it's absolutely blank because I didn't know I still don't know how I feel about it. I'm still on the fence in terms of, look, I was chatting to someone in the shops the other day about this, another fellow Formula One fan here in Monaghan, and I asked them how they felt about it. And they said, there's been rumors and talk about, is this going to be good for Formula One? Is it going to be bad for Formula One? The reality is in 90 something days when the 2022 season kicks off in Bahrain, there will be so many more people watching the season from the outset because of what happened in that last race in Abu Dhabi. So call it the next Netflixization of sport, absolutely. And it did kind of cross the boundary between sport and entertainment for sure, especially in that final race in Abu Dhabi. But in terms of increasing the interest in Formula One, and we do have to thank Netflix and Drive to Survive for bringing a lot of fans back into Formula One. A lot of even dormant Formula One fans who maybe even in Ireland were fans of Jordan and Eddie Irvine and you know, the Irish Lynx and Eddie Jordan in years gone past and through the 90s and early 2000s. They've now come back to the sport. A lot of them had forgotten who was on the grid. They didn't know any of the drivers beyond Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and maybe some of the older guys like Alonso and Vettel. But all of a sudden, all of these drivers, like 2 years ago, if you'd asked me who are the Haas drivers, not a clue. Now I can tell you it's Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin. I mean, we can list off the drivers, and I'm not the only one, at the drop of a hat now because of things like Drive to Survive. The final race itself in Abu Dhabi left a strange taste in the mouth in that Hamilton was the better driver on the day by all accounts, straight from the first corner, overtaking Max Verstappen, who had been on pole, leading for 51 of the opening 57 laps or something. And then that final lap 58, pure carnage. You know, and the fact that Michael Massey, the FIA race director, ultimately allowed only 5 of the lapped cars to overtake the safety car. That was what led Max Verstappen to being directly behind Lewis Hamilton for that final lap on newer tires, on softer tires, which gave him the opportunity to go and win it. And essentially, Michael Massey was saying, here's a lap for the championship. So could have finished the race behind the safety car. And by default, if he had allowed all of the cars to overtake the safety car, it would have meant that essentially Lewis Hamilton would have won the championship because it would have taken a lap for all the cars to overtake the safety car. But as it turned out, he only allowed certain cars. And it was interesting. I was reading something actually within the last number of weeks, John, as well, that a very similar incident occurred, a quite similar incident occurred at the Eiffel Grand Prix in Germany last October. So October of 2020, Lando Norris's McLaren had an issue with a few laps left, meaning the safety car had to come out. At the time, Verstappen and Hamilton were first and second, respectively, a few back markers between them. And at that race, Michael Massey, the FIA race director, said there's a requirement in the sporting regulations to waive all the lapped cars past. And in Germany, all the lapped cars were waved through. Now in Abu Dhabi, as I said, only 5 cars. Only
why
B5.
the change?
This is the thing. And a lot of people are pointing this out now in recent days. They're saying there's no consistency here, that because it was for a championship, Massey decided this is the drama. This is what people want. They don't want the season to end on a safety car lap. But if that had happened and Massey had done what he had done previously in Germany the year before, Lewis Hamilton will be the world champion for a record-breaking 8th time and would have overtaken Michael Schumacher. Instead, only some of those cars were waved through, and it turned out Daniel Ricciardo, who actually finished the race in 12th in Abu Dhabi, was the one behind Verstappen and Hamilton in the final lap and had that perfect view. Like even Ricciardo was asked afterwards, so he was sitting in 12th position, but actually the one directly behind Verstappen and Hamilton as things stood because of the laps. He says, I don't want you to ask me, I want to ask you, tell me what happened. He said, crazy finale. At the end of it was kind of weird. They said cars can't pass, the lapped cars, then some of them did, but then I wasn't allowed to. We did a 1-lap restart. I'm sitting right behind Lewis and Max, like, why am I here? I don't know. It was very interesting. So look, one of the most exciting last race title deciders in history. It was the first time since 1974 the 2 title rivals went into the final race level on points. That was the season where Emerson Fittipaldi beat off Clay Regazzoni to the title. But I mean, high drama at its very best, John. And look, it really, really sets it up very nicely for next year. George Russell is joining Mercedes, taking Valtteri Bottas' seat. So it'll be an all-British pair of Russell and Hamilton for Mercedes. Russell is someone who will be challenging in the next 3 to 5 years for a world title. Max Verstappen is already there. I mean, it really, really, look, Hamilton's going to be back. He wants to win that 8th world title, but it sets it up very, very nicely indeed. Call it Netflixization, call it Formula One drama at its very best. Either way, I'll be back. I'll be watching Bahrain next year. That's one thing for sure.
Of course you will, because this is your thing. So that's completely understandable. I would have loved to have seen the rules consistently applied and the race to finish behind the safety car. I thought it would have been weird. It would have been beautiful. It would have honored the fact that Lewis Hamilton was the best driver by a clear margin on the day. I can't understand how you could be over 10 seconds ahead of somebody to being a sitting duck within the space of a few minutes. That is wrong for me. Sport now, maybe I'm not in with the 2021 trends, but sport for me is about rules and actually about fair play. And my life is wholly governed by fairness. And I think Lewis Hamilton didn't get a fair crack. I don't blame Max Verstappen or Christian Horner in any way. They just played by the rules that were set for them with a race director who had too much control and it was a little bit cloudy, and it shouldn't have been cloudy. But as you say, look, it was like all these shiny things. You can't take your eye off, and you can't take your eye off at the entertainment. So, yeah, look, you're probably right. Everybody's going to be glued to it now in the spring, and I just hope the sport can maintain be above the parapet from an integrity point of view. If this happened again, I think it can happen once, and we can all go, wow, what was that like? Because Prost and Senna did go off at the first turn in 1990. So these things can happen in Formula One, but if it continued to happen, then you'd wonder, does it turn into a little bit of a circus, So I think I'm up next, am I?
You're up next, John.
Yeah, golf.
Okay,
Leona Mcguire. Yeah, Leona Mcguire and Phil Mickelson. They're the two stories golf-wise for me. Like the Ryder Cup is worth touching upon, but not in too much detail. Leona Mcguire is going to be a major champion. She's a neighbouring county, Shane, in Cavan. 177th in the world rankings last year. Now 43rd, 27 years of age. Nothing flashy about her. Fairways and greens type of player, but was the world amateur number one. She's been finding her way in the United States. That's not easy to try and make it on the tour. But she had a couple of runners-up finishes this year. She finished with a 61 in a major championship, 5 top 10s. But it's all about one thing for me. And the reason why she's going to be a winner and a champion and an Irish major champion in the future, in my view, is her mental strength. The example for that, the Solheim Cup. She's a rookie. She's turning up for the first time for Europe. They don't normally win in the States. They only won once before they went to Inverness in Ohio this year to play the USA. 4.5 points out of 5. Played in all 5 sessions. Set the tone with Mel Reid. They beat the Korda sisters, Nelly Korda, the world number one. Then she beat Jennifer Kupcho in the singles, if you remember, 5 and 4. The putts went in, the fist pumps, the pure steel that Leona Mcguire showed. Like sometimes in sport, people come of age. Brian O'Driscoll in 2000 against France with a hat-trick. That was the moment, wow, Brian O'Driscoll's really arrived here. Or Ruby Walsh winning the Grand National actually that same year on Papillon. Or Katie Taylor winning the Olympic gold to confirm all the promise that she'd shown. Or Kelly Harrington this year. People arrive, people are there. People are there then forever. Ronnie Delaney, it's 65 years this year. He's there forever as that man who won in Melbourne. And for me, Leona Mcguire has put her stamp almost like a halfway there now. And I think the major will just confirm what she did in Inverness. So I think like Tiger 97 as well just came onto the scene. So from an Irish sporting point of view, Leona Mcguire, I think is going to have a great future ahead of her. And I really, really do hope that she can win that major. And remember, like her sister, Lisa, as well, was such a huge part of it. And I think they grew up together, playing golf together, and she's got Dermot Byrne on the bag now. And I really do think she's well set. Phil Mickelson, like golf has been played for 160 years at major level, and we've never had a 50-year-old win a major championship. And I know players are fitter now and look, health is better and all that kind of thing. But for Phil Mickelson to win that PGA Championship at Kilo Island was just a great story. There was that moment when the crowd and somebody jumped on his back. They're just following him like something like a Pied Piper. When he's walking down 18, he's face down Louis Westhuizen, Brooks Koepka, all these players. I was going through the ages. 29, 26, and 24 were the other 3 major champions' ages this year. And Phil Mickelson at 50 years of age. He, behind Tiger Woods, is the best player of the last 25 years. A magical short game. And he played with composure to keep the ball on the fairway. And he played within himself. Like he'd no form coming into it. He's no form after it. To be able to channel at 50 years of age, your concentration, your emotion, and your ability into 4 great rounds of golf to win the PGA Championship by 2 shots. He deserved fully to be drinking wine out of the Wanamaker Trophy, which is what he was doing, and drinking lots of coffee. And I think Phil Mickelson is one of the heroes, one of the greatest sports people we've seen in golf. 6 major championships. The Ryder Cup for me, like it's really disappointing from an Irish perspective that Padraig Harrington was the captain. We didn't win. 19 points to 9. It's just these things are cyclical. America have great players at the moment, and Rory crying and Shane Lowry, the emotion that came out of him, you could see that he loved every moment of it in that team background that he came from in GAA. And I'm really excited about golf next year, Shane. 2022, Shane, Rory McIlroy going for that Masters after winning his 20th PGA Tour title this year. Victor Hovland of Norway is very exciting. John Ram won a major this year. The Americans, you got Dustin Johnson, Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay, and Colin Morikawa. I can't wait for next year. But yeah, Leona Mcguire was the highlight of my year.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And Like Phil Mickelson is one, the quirky character. You'd argue golf is a sport that needs those quirky characters. Like I think of Alex Higgins in snooker and what he did for the sport. Phil Mickelson is that person who in interviews, you want to turn the interview up because you don't know what he's going to say. And he's a bit of crack. But Leona Mcguire, I don't know what's left to be said about Leona Mcguire, but as a Monaghan man, we don't often praise County Cavan people, sports people, whatever you might say. But I would absolutely have no problem making an exception for Leona Mcguire because what she achieved at the Solheim Cup was special. Everyone could see that. I know everyone back in Ballyconnell and County Cavan will be so proud of her and what she achieved this year. And the scary thing is, I mean, she's only 26 years of age, I think maybe. Certainly was 26 during the Solheim Cup, but her best days are probably ahead of her. And she can become one of our great sports people. It seems strange to say that after what she's already achieved, but what she can do in the future, who knows? And like I just while you were speaking there, I wanted to quickly look back. We of course did on Off the Ball our Mount Rushmores of different counties, and I was quickly googling the Cavan Mount Rushmore. So it was Katrina McKiernan, Paul Brady in handball, Mick Higginson from Gaelic football, 3-time All-Ireland winner, and then Leona Mcguire was put in by Paul Fitzpatrick of the Anglo-Celt, replacing Dave McIntyre's choice of John Joe O'Reilly. But Paul had the final say and got to replace one towards the end, and he put in Leona Mcguire, and I think he summed it up quite well in his words. He said, "What she has achieved," and this is, by the way, before the Solheim Cup. This is back in May of 2020, so way before the Solheim Cup. And he said, "What she has achieved, I would be of the belief that if she put down her golf clubs tomorrow and never played again, she has done enough to be on any Mount Rushmore." 25 years of age at the time. If you look back through her career, she was winning adult scratch cups at the age of 12, along with her sister Lisa. She won the Scottish Amateur at Troon at the age of 14. The ordinary hacker like me, if I go to Troon and driving past and stop to take a photograph at 14, she's out there playing in this course and beating the top amateurs in the UK. She turned pro, already has got a top 5 finish. If you think about the depth of talent there is in golf, I would say Leona is right up there. That was in May 2020. Paul Fitzpatrick said that. She went on to do what she did and become the highest scoring amateur ever with 4.5 points out of 5 in the Solheim Cup. So clearly well deserving of her Cavan Mount Rushmore place and a lot more.
Well, you mentioned him earlier on, Malachy Clerkin. One of the best articles I ever read on sport was about the Cavan Monaghan Gaelic football rivalry, and there was an old lad who said to a young lad who was kind of down in the dumps, "What would you be worried about? Sure, the hay saved," and it was either Cavan or Monaghan bet. So it was the line. Who's on the Monaghan Mount Rushmore briefly?
The Monaghan Mount Rushmore, to the top of my head, was Tommy Bowe, Barry McGuigan, Nudie Hughes, and it was Brendan McInespy. So a couple of Gaelic football heads. Barry McGuigan, obviously world champion boxer, and Tommy Bowe, given what he's done for Ireland and the Lions. So it probably wrote itself. Conor McManus, maybe I might count himself a little bit unlucky, but it's a good sporting county. John, I think you'll agree. We have the McKenna brothers now, of course, in the boxing ranks. Kevin McBride knocked out Mike Tyson, albeit towards the end of Tyson's career. And Jonathan Douglas, few caps for Ireland as well. So a good county for sport. But I think that the top 4 wrote themselves, really.
Listeners out there, on Christmas Day across Ireland, a good exercise maybe for you to think with your family, the top 4 sports people in your county. I picked the Dublin one, Shane, and I picked you could have 50. I picked Jim Gavin, Brian O'Driscoll, Padraig Harrington, and Paul McGrath. So if I was going to pick it again, I'd probably pick 4 different names. But they still are the 4 that I would have picked. Your next choice is sports-wise?
I'm heading to rugby, John, and the win over the All Blacks. We have to touch on that. I mean, rugby gets a little bit of hate in this country. I would say. I think from non-rugby quarters, when we beat the All Blacks in a November international or whatever it might be, the dominant atmosphere among anti-rugby fans is, it's only a friendly. This game doesn't matter. The All Blacks they're not putting out their strong team. The reality is, November internationals, autumn internationals do matter to rugby fans, to rugby players, and they're not friendlies. You only need to look at the sheer level of pure doggedness in these games between Ireland and the All Blacks when they play in November to see that they're not friendlies. But we need to stop that pettiness as a nation. I think we need to realize we're very, very good at rugby union for a country of our size. But John, I mean, this game at the Aviva Stadium, and the tickets were the hottest tickets in town to get to this match in the Aviva. Of course, the plan was to add to the historic wins in 2016 and 2018 over the All Blacks. And then what happened? A heroic Irish performance, 29 points to 20 win over New Zealand. The third over the All Blacks in 33 meetings. So it shows you how rare it is. So to have one in this calendar year was quite incredible. Extending a winning run as well to 7 matches with that win. They had the win over Japan the week before. People going into the New Zealand game not wondering where their game was. But really, I mean, Caelan Doris got man of the match. I just want to point out some of the people who were crucial to that win. Caelan Doris, man of the match, but there were outstanding performances everywhere in the pitch. Guy Ringrose was incredible with his bandage on his head. James Lowe perhaps had his best game in an Irish jersey. The forwards didn't give up an inch in that entire game. Started really with Johnny Sexton during the anthem. You saw how completely focused the man was. And Ireland started so quickly. And clearly that this decision to start from the off paid, because we had the try from James Lowe, as I said, he 8th cap for Ireland, probably his best game for his adopted country, popped up everywhere. But Ireland didn't have it all their own way. They were up against it. Tested the All Blacks to the limit, but the All Blacks led by 10 points to 5 heading into the halftime interval. Jordie Barrett knocked over a penalty, converted a try from Taylor. But that kind of went against the run of play. I remember even the pundits, listening to Tommy Bowe at halftime speaking about the Irish wave that was coming, and Ireland probably hadn't converted their 70% possession, 7 visits into the opposition 22 in the first half, yet only 5 points. So 10-5 they trailed. But then 2 minutes after halftime, we'd get this try from Caoimhín Kelleher. Quite important try, it has to be said, from Caoimhín Kelleher to change the tone of the game, change the tide of the atmosphere, I think, in the stadium as well, because we'd had the haka, of course, pre-game, which is always a sight to see, one of the greatest sights in sport. But then a relentless effort by New Zealand, 238 tackles against 101 by Ireland in the match, which just goes to show the amount of work Ireland put in and the amount of work they forced New Zealand to have to put in. A famous victory, relegated New Zealand, by the way, to number 2 in the world rankings behind South Africa. So it was a defeat that the All Blacks did not want whatsoever. But those 2 Joey Carberry penalties then in the final 7 minutes, they will be kicks that he will remember for the rest of his life. And he's a man who's been very unlucky with injury with Munster, but certainly he can look back in his 2021. And if you take out everything else, those 2 kicks in the final 7 minutes, it was only their 3rd time in 41 tests in Europe that the All Blacks had lost. So clearly, when they come to this continent, they tend to do quite well. But at this stage, the All Blacks must be looking at this Irish team and thinking, these guys are warriors.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And a well-deserved victory for Ireland, a famous victory for Ireland, and one I think everyone in the Aviva Stadium and anyone who watched live, even at home on their television sets, will remember for quite some time to come.
It was the day I broke dry November.
See, that's the impact it had, John.
Well, there you go. So I'm glad you didn't mention the Lions tour, because that was utterly forgettable. And I do think fans is everything. Like the environment, the sterile environment in South Africa versus anybody who went to that All Blacks game. My nephew Daniel was a steward, and he's 20 years of age, and just for him to experience that,
he'll never forget it.
He won't, and he was doing his job obviously at the time, but you're still able to get caught up with it. And like Brian O'Driscoll was talking about it on OTB afterwards. For over 100 years, we couldn't beat the All Blacks, and it was the one big thing in rugby we couldn't do. And then for his young lad, he's bringing his young lad, and it's routine. Like we've beaten them 3 times now since 2016, and you'll never get tired of that, Shane. You'll never get tired of beating the team that has the biggest aura in rugby. Whoever the world champions are at the time, and I know New Zealand are not right now, they will always have that All Black jersey. Will always be the one to overcome. And for me, it's all about consistency. Our World Cup record is chronic for a sport played probably by about 10 serious nations competitively at it, that can really challenge at the business end. And no semi-finals since 1987 is shocking. And we got to change that. But with the consistency you pointed to, if we can get that consistency, and Andy Farrell can build with Paul O'Connell and Mike Catt something for France, it's the Northern Hemisphere. If we could just get a run, you never know. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling Ireland are just going to break through at a World Cup, and they could reach the final or they could win it. And it's all about us putting ourselves in the position, because we've got a lot of talented players, and hopefully, like the likes of Joey Carberry, as you said there, can flourish and be ready for 2023. But look, we're ending the year on a positive note from the men's side anyway, and hopefully, obviously, we've got sorted with issues to sort out from the union and the women, and hopefully there will be in a positive manner next year. Gaelic football is my last choice before we get on to your last choice, Shane. Unlikely All-Ireland champions, I would describe Tyrone and Meath as. So another year, not Gaelic football. the back door gone back to the time before 2001, obviously because of COVID. I don't know how you feel at the end of the year, Shane, with Monaghan losing to Tyrone by point.
not too good, John.
Not too good. Yeah.
When you lose by a point in a provincial decider to Tyrone and they go on to win the All Ireland, you start to question what if. Monaghan, of course, would never won an All Ireland, but you can't take it away from that Tyrone team. What Brian Dooher and Fergal Logan have done with them is they've set the bar. They've set the bar for everyone else. They've shown what's possible. You see some of those players in that team: McGeary, Canavan, McCurry, Niall Morgan, Richard Donnelly. Like, I can't take it away from them. And the fact that they went on to beat that Kerry team and then beat Mayo, well deserved All Ireland, and that pains me to say that as a Monaghan man. It's like the Cavan conundrum all over again, John. But deserving champions has to be said.
You're feeling generous on Christmas Day.
Very generous. It must be Christmas. Yeah, it was Christmas. I wouldn't say it any other day of the year.
You would. Cavan and Tyrone getting all the praise from Shane Hannon today. 6 goals against Kerry conceded in the league. It's almost like that was the turning point. Another thing I thought for me, Mickey Hart was amazing for Tyrone. He is like the most important figure in Tyrone Gaelic football history. 3 All-Ireland titles. They never won All-Ireland before 2003. But maybe the freshness was required from Brian Dooher and Fergal Logan. As you say, all these players, Conor McKenna, Cathal McShane with the crucial goals. High balls, a feature of their wins. And they won 5 games to win the All-Ireland, and they seem to get stronger every time. Like Kerry couldn't finish the job against them, and they got 3 goals against Kerry. Mayo, they beat by 5 points comfortably. I thought Mayo were very poor in the final. That curse continues. And it was, I suppose, a year we were expecting Dublin and Kerry to be in the final. It just didn't work out that way. Dublin, to be honest, needed to lose. They needed to lose. They needed a reset, and they weren't good enough in the second half against Mayo. You'd have to feel very much where Mayo are going to go from here. I don't know. With Dublin and Kerry, obviously resurgent next year, given their defeats this year. But I don't know if it was a vintage year, but it doesn't mean the All-Ireland is worth anything less for Tyrone. Conor Myler, Peter Hart, Darren McCurry, Kieran McGeary. They used all of their savvy and belief. And I think those players would not have won that All-Ireland without those wins in 2003 and 2005 and 2008, and infused with that belief of Brian Dooher, who was involved in as twice as captain. And they were really, really united. There was the controversy over the fact that they had to, the COVID issue, and they had to, they weren't able to fulfill the Kerry game. Maybe they were fresher, but with all of these things, it's a bit like the Formula One and Max Verstappen. All you can do is win it when it's in front of you, and that's what Tyrone did, and fully deserved All-Ireland wins. In 2015, Meath ladies lost a qualifier to Cork by 40 points. Now, I know Eamon Murray has played a huge part in getting Meath football, which has a good population base, to an All-Ireland success, but it really is a golden story. Like, they won an intermediate title only this time last year. Then they win the Division 2. Then they beat Cork in a semi-final. Then they win the All-Ireland against the Dubs. And Emma Duggan, teenage person, setting the scene with that opportunistic goal. And that's one of those just moments, again, in sport where you go, that's the moment when somebody arrives. And Emma Duggan, who's going to have a huge career in ladies football for me, you'd expect, arrive with that moment. And then you're expecting Dublin to just come back and win that 5 in a row and assert themselves. It just didn't happen. And from that moment on, it's slipping and it's sliding for them, and it's slipping away. You can just tell it's slipping away. Vicky Wall, huge, but the tenacity of the Meath players, they built that from nothing by Eamon Murray getting players to say, you know what, okay, we're going to commit to this. We're going to put on the Meath jersey. And it was one of the most inspiring stories of the year. Cora Staunton was on there with me at the time, and we couldn't believe what we were seeing. That this is actually, you could feel from kind of a bit out that Meath are actually going to do this. And then they did it. And what an inspiration that is to any Gaelic football team in the country, that this can be done. It's the art of the possible, and it's never stop believing. And it was one of the most heartwarming stories for me of the year.
Yeah, the underdog stories, I think, really just strike a chord with people. And I remember sitting watching that Meath game against the Dubs in the final, and before the game, you're sitting down and you're just asking yourself how much you're Dublin going to win by here. Like, it's one of those instances because you're just like, there's no chance like a team can come from intermediate last year to winning the senior. Getting to the final was their All Ireland, in Meath's heads, but in Meath's heads, they absolutely thought they could win it and went on to do so, because even saw them interviewed in the Late Late Show kind of after the final, and that's what they said. They said we had absolute conviction in our heads and in training sessions and in all of our discussions that we were going to win that final. And they went to then go and do it. Is testament, to Eamon Murray, and it's testament to every single one of those Meath players. But year of the underdogs. I mean, we were kind of, harking about the death of Gaelic football when Dublin were on their run of many All-Irelands there, John.
It wasn't death for me, I can tell you that.
Not for you, not for a Dubs fan.
A glorious experience. No.
Yeah, but I say long may it continue. Long may it continue. And who knows, maybe 2022 is the year for Mayo finally, John.
Well, Nathan Murphy would be happy if that happened. Maybe he deserves that. What do you got to finish, Shane? Is it snooker? Of course it's snooker.
John. I have to give some love to the lesser minority sports. Like, I should mention the darts as well. Of course, it's Christmas time, so we'll talk about the darts as well. The darts is ongoing at the moment, the PDC. But back in January, of course, Gerwyn Price winning the PDC World Championship for the first time in his career. He beat Gary Anderson 7-3 in the final. Took him over Michael van Gerwen to world number 1. So just a quick mention for darts as well. Of course, Ger Gilroy mightn't like that. He calls it Brexit down the pub, but it's worth a mention. And it means darts means Christmas, and Christmas means darts for me. The snooker as well, John, has to be discussed. Look, the Crucible Theatre has a certain mystique about it. It's one of those places I've been to a couple of World Snooker Championships in recent years. Of course, not in the last couple because of COVID. But it's one of the special amphitheaters of modern sport. The World Championship has been there since 1977, I think it is. And so many historic moments across the years. 32 players start each tournament. But this year's tournament, really enjoyed it. Perhaps not as much as the previous year. Ronnie O'Sullivan winning, and the day of the two mad semi-finals when Ronnie beat Mark Selby in a decider and Karen Wilson saw off Anthony McGill in a decider. And yet still, there was no crowd at that one. We finally got a crowd, a full crowd for the final of this year's 2021 World Snooker Championship. But the tournament itself was quite exciting. You'd upset in the first round, Stuart Bingham beating world number 9 Ding Junhui 10 frames to 9. Then in round 2, Ronnie O'Sullivan knocked out 12-11 against Anthony McGill, which was a bit of a surprise to say the least. John Higgins losing to Mark Williams by 13 frames to 7. Then in the quarterfinals, Higgins, of course, had been world champion 4 times previously. Another notable match, Sean Murphy beating Yan Bingqiao. Yan Bingqiao, the Chinese player, had won the Masters tournament earlier this year, and it has to be said the Chinese players are really coming now, and they are coming with a flourish. And it's only a matter of time before one of them wins a World Snooker Championship for the first time. You had the quarterfinals then, 27th and 28th of April of this year. That's where the world number 1 was knocked out. Judd Trump lost to Sean Murphy 13 frames to 11. Other big name casualties as well: Neil Robertson, Mark Williams, Anthony McGill. And that left in ranking order Mark Selby, Karen Wilson, Sean Murphy, and Stuart Bingham in the semi-finals. And then the final, of course, Mark Selby getting over the line 18-16. It's 18-15, in fact, against Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy, of course, had won the World Snooker Championship once before as an amateur back in 2005, baby-faced Sean Murphy. But Mark Selby did what Mark Selby does. He grinds out games. 4-time world champion now after that win in front of a sold-out crowd. And people forget that win in the World Championship this year moves Mark Selby level on World Championship wins with John Higgins on 4 titles. And only Stephen Hendry, Steve Davis, and Ronnie O'Sullivan have won more. So Hendry's on 7, and Davis and O'Sullivan have both won 6 World Finals apiece. Just what a champion Mark Selby is. His 4th world title, his 9th Triple Crown. He's part of that pantheon of greats now. But a special mention to Sean Murphy just before we finish, because he's now Irish, essentially. He's an Englishman, of course. But 3 of his 4 grandparents, Sean Murphy, were Irish. On his mother's side from Donabate, on his father's from Kilcock and Kildare. His kids are now growing up in Ballantyre in Dublin. His wife, Elaine, is a professor of chemical biology in UCD. And his kids are still have the little remnants of the English accent, but they run around wearing their Dublin GAA jerseys now for their mother. But Sean Murphy managed to speak to him for Off the Ball after that World Final. And like, he talked about the fist pumps that he had going throughout the tournament to get the crowd on his side. He also spoke about his essentially tough life, his bullying at age 13, penultimate day of year 9. And David Kelly wrote a great piece in the Irish Independent on this a couple of years ago. He says, he said, I'd love to say at age 36, I've forgotten, but I haven't, and I never will. It was an experience that left a mark on him and actually forced him to be homeschooled for the remainder of his school days. And he's had other dark days. You know, the coronavirus restrictions led him and other players to having spent a lot of time away from their family. In July of 2020, he lost his best friend and former manager, Brandon Parker, to cancer. So he's come through a lot, Sean Murphy. But really, he was the story for me of the World Snooker Championship, although Mark Selby certainly writing himself into the history books with a fourth World Snooker title. But another exciting World Snooker Championship, John, and who knows, maybe in April or May, if restrictions allow, I'll finally get back over to the World Snooker Championship at the Crucible for my third event.
Well, you have utter passion for it. It was the first sport I ever watched snooker, 84 final, Davis and Jimmy White. And Davis was my hero when I was a young lad in the 80s. So I'll always have that affection for it. And I'm able to, like a soap opera, dip in and out of it. Generally, though, around World Championship time, I think China's influence in the sport is fantastic, and the broadening of the appeal of the sport. So you got to get to Monaco as well next year, Shane. You got to get to that Monaco Grand Prix if you can. What are you going to do the next few days? I know I'm going to, like you talk about passions there. Obviously, I'm not going to be going to Tottenham Hotspur in the next few weeks, but I'm going to try and get to Leopardstown over the next few days. It's always one of the highlights of the Christmas season. You're meeting old friends, the hip flask, and socially distant and everything, and maybe trying to get a couple of winners. What's the plan in Monaghan? Any rituals in Monaghan over the next few days?
Usually the rituals involve going to the pub and having a few lovely pints of stout, John. But I'm going to take the downtime to plan out. Like, I know you're a good man for this and planning out your sporting bucket list. I'm going to take a few days to sit down and really think what I want to do. I'd love to get to the Indy 500 next year if I can. You mentioned Monaco, like myself and a few friends who were unfortunately in Spa last year or earlier this year. And didn't get to see much of a race, or hoping to head to Monza for Italian Grand Prix later this year. I've got my own endeavor as well. You'll remember I climbed Kilimanjaro a couple of years ago, and how do you know someone has climbed Kilimanjaro? They'll tell you about it, similar to running a marathon. But we have myself and two mates have Mount Elbrus in our sights, not Everest, but Mount Elbrus in the Caucasus region in Russia, right along the border with Georgia. It's the highest mountain in Europe. So over 5,600 meters. So it's a couple of hundred meters smaller than Kilimanjaro, but perhaps more dangerous in terms of the altitude, and there's a lot more snow and ice. So we'll have to do a bit of training for that. We booked it ages ago, a year and a half ago, whatever it was. But of course, COVID hit and has put this plan on hold. So we're hoping for maybe in April, May, June. Between those 3 months, we'll make a summit attempt and see can we get to the highest point of Europe as we got to the highest point in Africa. So that's on my to-do list. There'll be a bit of planning over the next few days, I think.
Well, listeners out there, I hope you all got great plans for 2022 as you enjoy your Christmas day. From a sporting perspective, it's always great to see these events and the adventure and the experiences. I think life is a collection of experiences. If you're able to collect an experience of your sports plan, whatever it might be, whether it's your local team or a kids team, an underage team that you're watching or coaching, or anything that you're involved in. If you're going to the height of a Wimbledon or a World Cup or rugby or big rugby games, enjoy it, plan it out for next year. I'd love to go and see the Masters. I'd love to see Boca Juniors, River Plate in Argentina, and all these things you can aspire to and hopefully get to. Shane, thanks so much for reviewing the sporting year with me.
Great stuff. Thanks, John. Happy Christmas to everyone listening.
And happy Christmas to you and your family and everybody. If you're tuning in, folks, we're hoping you're enjoying your Christmas day, because stay with us between now and 5, because after the break, we're going to bring you one of the best Saturday panels we did this year on the subject of running with Olympian Sonia O'Sullivan, John Tracy, and Lizzie Lee. We're back after this.